Today's podcast was with South African pro license coach Steve Bez. He is approaching 30 years, approaching 3 decades in coaching very soon. He gave us a wonderful insight into South African football, the youth structure, the professional structure, the women's structure, spoke about his own opinions on coaching, gave some valuable advice to the younger coaches. So it was a real productive chat, I would say. Another wonderful podcast. Super excited. Today I'm with the highly experienced Steve Bez from South Africa. Steve, thank you for joining. How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you. Very, very good. Must be honest, I was watching some of your other podcasts earlier in the week. A little bit disappointed I wasn't the first African, but gotta take it as it comes, I guess, eh?
Well, second isn't bad enough at all. And South Africa being such a large footballing nation, I really look forward to interacting with you. Yeah.
Yeah, good.
So
Good, I look
you
too.
So you were a professional player, then became a coach. You were once shortlisted to be South Africa's technical director. You are the assistant coach of the South Africa under 17 national team. You have been a coach educator. You have been a successful coach as well, winning 7 national titles as well as 13 provincial wins. You also have a pro license. So you have done quite a lot. But how did the journey in football begin?
Um, the journey in football started, I think, like a lot of kids in this country. Mom and dad took me down to the local football club when I was 5, and I had a cousin that played football as well, and we just loved it. Like I just loved it. Like fell in love with the game, fell in love with fun, the friendships. That progressed. It kind of worked out at some point that I had a bit of talent. I was quite fast, and that developed into a real passion and a burning desire to kick on and go somewhere further with it. So throughout my teenage years, played at. We didn't have academy leagues then, but we played in probably the cheapest league in we played against professional clubs. We were still highly competitive. I mean, my side that I played in had 5 future professionals in it, so that's a very good turnout actually. So through that, um, sort of got into it. Parents then said after I matriculated, got to study. So for 3 years, I played as high a level as I could, which was semi-professional, while I got a degree. Yeah, give me a year. If I haven't made it a year, we'll call it quits and we'll go and move into the real world, as they say. And right at the back end of the year, as the light was fading, as they say, I managed to pick up a contract with a club, very old club, African Wonders. So it had a good tradition. It turned out to be a real nightmare, actually. But at the time, I saw a team, they were interested in signing me. By this point, I'd become a goalkeeper. Because my whole youth career I'd played either up front or at centre back. They showed interest, said we'd like to sign you. We're looking for a backup keeper. I did a bit of research on them. They were sitting second in the league in the first division. Thought it was a very stable team, looks good. Asked some of the players, how's it been? Yeah, because you're never sure. You hear these things in football, and they are true stories, unfortunately, where players aren't getting paid. And they said, no, it's been great. 3 months in, everything's great. Training's good. And it was an absolute nightmare. So I spent the first 6 months. So it was a crazy time. But glad at it. Again, the experience you got, the travel experiences, the friendships you made. And even in terms of the coaching, it was great to learn even then from coaches what to do and what not to do, even, which I think is a very underrated thing for players. They don't always look with a critical eye of what the coach is doing and don't question what he's doing, which maybe sometimes they should. Got into that. Strange enough, always felt growing up I was going to be a coach more than a player. Always. From probably 9 years old, I had this thing that I wanted to coach. At 14, I was coaching 6-year-olds. So always wanted to be a coach, always wanted to manage, always enjoyed the the almost chess-like problem solving that being a coach / manager, even technical director, club owner, whatever, that sort of that level of understanding brought, where you had to have a whole lot of different pieces that you've got to move around the board to try and be successful. What is successful? So that was always interesting to me from a very young age. And so, yeah, played a few years of pro football, and from there moved on. Beg your pardon. Hope that doesn't go on the podcast. From that point of view, I kind of called my career quite early. I felt a call to start a football academy myself and coach. My high school was looking for a more professional football program, and it got hold of me and said, "Would you be interested?" They were going to do overseas tours over the next few years. So it was all very interesting to me. So left professional football, started my own academy, went and coached, and it was a great environment of coaching because the people above you had very low expectations and weren't really involved. So I got to be super creative with everything I did, coaching players, tinkering with formations, with ideas, with, I can distinctly remember having a period at the school where I coached my centre backs to enter the midfield as like a libero, if you want to call it that, and effectively leave you one centre back at the back. Now, didn't always work, but it was just an interesting time to develop a thought and how to manipulate space and how to manipulate time and how to develop players to understand the manipulation of time and space. So I was very fortunate to be in that situation with the school. From there, built a great base. The academy was thriving, had players kicking on from the academy into some of our top teams, Wits University, Sundowns in this country. So very fortunate to have that happening, except that I also then got my first real lesson of football there, how your professional clubs hold the power and your smaller academies and suppliers, let's call it, don't. And so the whole academy was built on the premise that we would develop a professional player every 2 years. That would generate a fee for compensation of roughly $10,000 to $20,000 US. That $10,000 to $20,000 would get reinvested into the academy. And so your shareholders would take a small dividend, but everything else would go in and you'd have this wheel going round and round. It didn't work like that, let me tell you. Otherwise, I'd probably still be doing it. So successful there, kicked on from there. Was then invited by the late Clive Barker to get involved with the Sharks Academy. Now, the Sharks franchise is actually a rugby franchise, interestingly, but they wanted to start a football division as a commercial academy for boys leaving school and entering the tertiary education. It was tertiary education plus football. And so, yeah, Clive recommended for that. And I did that for 2 years, at which point Amazulu FC came knocking on my door and said, "Hey, are you interested in running our youth? We're looking for a head of youth. Would you be interested?" And I jumped in, and I had 5 or 6 great years there. I think we did some really, really interesting stuff there. Again, I was fortunate enough that for the most part, I was allowed to sort of outroll my vision and create my vision and make some tweaks to what they were doing and make it more, in my opinion, more individual player development based than it was. And I think the fruit is born from that. We've even now there's still players that are now sort of 21, 22 that are starting to make professional debuts that came to that system that I won't say wouldn't have otherwise, but certainly are more rounded individuals, which is something that I've always believed in as a coach. You don't develop a football player, you develop a human that is good at football. So yeah, that's takes me to that point. After 5 or 6 years, it was time to leave, and we moved on. I started my own consulting company because I felt, again, a call to do more and sort of develop the game at a higher level on a broader base, which was soccer tech, and then back to high school football, where I'm technical director now at a high school. We're ranked 5th in the country, Durban High School,
Okay.
last year, which again, we came from being unranked years ago, and we've sort of really progressed, and it's all centered around a clear culture, a clear style of play that speaks into the culture, and then getting individual players, individual coaches to A, buy into that culture, and B, execute that culture. Yeah, I think I answered your question.
It's quite a journey you've had, right? You've had it over a plethora of different environments. But if you started coaching at 14, then how many years have you been in coaching for now?
You're going to tell me my age now, aren't I? Um, so basically 28 years I've been coaching.
Amazing.
So
And
42 now.
okay, 28 years. That's brilliant. So you've also been an entrepreneur. So you've had a company called Soccer Tech. So what was the vision
Yeah.
and why did you decide to shut it down?
Okay, so yeah, that was it was disappointing that I had to shut it down. But again, as I said, alluded to earlier, it sort of came as the tear away from my time at Amazulu. I just saw a need in high schools, in your middle income high schools, to really elevate the game. And one of the key things missing was a knowledge on how to develop a system. So basically, our slogan there was creating strategies, changing lives. And the key was to create a more clear pathway for that 10, 11, 12-year-old kid in South Africa in the middle incomes to say, I can go to that school. I can get a great football education on top of a good education. And after school, we then have options to go to American universities, independent academies in Europe, professional clubs in South Africa. So we had created that sort of network and framework. Um, and then we had, on top of that, a preparation pipeline, we called it, which was us getting involved in amateur clubs
Yeah.
from the age of 6 to 13, where we'd educate coaches, run their coaching programs, run curriculum. So that was how we did it. The ethos was to basically create footballing strategies for these organizations
Yeah.
that allowed better player pathway movement, if I can say that, and better opportunities. That was key. And again, we had moderate success with players, I guess. We had some players that came through when we started it at they would have been 13.
Yeah.
Company when the company closed its doors, they had gone through it, the entire organism from a club to one of our schools, and had now been sent overseas to the United States to play football there. So that was great. On why we closed. Unfortunately, I mean, we went from having 5 schools in KZN. We had 4 clubs on a database. We were running holiday camps every holiday. We were plugged in with 3 professional clubs, trying to feed them. The whole system was there, and our friend COVID-19 came along, and it
Okay.
just completely changed the economic landscape, where for 2 or 3 years, it just wasn't feasible anymore. Nobody wanted our assistance, let's put it that way, or nobody could afford our assistance. That's maybe a better way to put it. So obviously, I have a wife and kids, and you've got to put food on the table at some point.
Yeah.
And so it just after trying for a year and a half or so, we just said, got to call it and close our doors. Unfortunately,
Well, you had the right idea. I'm sure there was no error in what you were trying to do, and COVID-19 was completely out of our hands. So, but
yeah.
understandable. Some things don't work out, but nevertheless, there's always something to look forward to. And also, with the experience you have had in youth football, I think you're the best person to ask. What's the youth football structure like in South Africa, both recreationally as well as formally?
So it's quite an interesting question that because South Africa is not geographic. I wouldn't consider South Africa a geographically large country. Certainly not compared to India or Australia. But it's quite a diverse country in a very small area. So the the basic structure is you go to a local club
Yeah.
um, at age 5 or 6. You play grassroots football 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, 17, and then you have senior leagues from there that play.
Yeah.
And those senior leagues have our Prem PSL, which is obviously our professional league, NFD, National First Division, which is also a professional league. We then have the what's known as a SAFA First division, which is also it's a sponsorship brand, is the Motsepe League.
Yeah.
That is our third tier, which is in a lot of cases actually professional,
Yeah.
a professional salary within the league, and that is nine different leagues because you have 9 provinces. So it's a provincial league. You play within your province. Those the winners of those 9 leagues then meet up in a playoff, and 2 of those 9 then get promoted to the first division, the professional ranks.
Okay.
Below that, we have it's called the regional league. So obviously, each province is then segregated into regions, and you have a regional league there.
Yeah.
Again, theoretically, 16 teams in a region, 10 regions in a province. You got your 10 winners coming together to get promoted to top, and then the 2 finalists get promoted into. And then below that, you get what's called the local football association structure. So there you might have a local football association, Premier League, Division 1, Division 2. It depends how many teams you have
Yeah.
within the local area. So a place like Durban Central is quite a conducive area. There's quite a lot of teams, so they go down to Div 3. But right next door to us is Pinetown. Pinetown is a lot less dense, so they have 1 league. That's your senior football. And what I've told you now is you can pick that up on the SAFA website.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like.
Okay.
In reality,
Yeah.
that is not what it's like. We do have the senior structure as you see it there. But the youth structure doesn't necessarily feed into it. There are a lot of teams, not clubs. There's a lot of informal football played. There are a lot of footballers that won't play any club football. They'll play club football until 13. Then they'll go to a high school, like ours, like a Durban high school, DHS. And they won't play club football for 5 years. They won't touch a club football. But they will still be developing. And then they might even jettison into a professional team from there. That's common, actually. Or they might then go back into res football or social football or men's football in one of those tiers. So that is your overall structure, and that is how the youth structure goes. But again, you go into more informal areas. In this country, we call them townships, sort of lower income areas. They're not really playing leagues at 6, 7, 8, 9. It's completely street football. It's completely unofficial, irregular football. So as a 6-year-old, I might walk down to my local patch of grass or dirt or street, and there might be boys aged anything from 5 to 8 or 9 playing together, and you'll be a little 6-year-old just trying it out. So a little bit, I mean, again, I don't know, like your favelas in Brazil, these sort of areas. That's kind of how it works. So it's quite complex in South Africa. It's definitely not a straight line.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, most of your really good individual talent is not coming out of your official pipeline. It's coming out of your unofficial pipeline.
Right.
And then into that official pipeline at some point, maybe age 13 or 15, or older. I mean, when I was at Amazulu, we had a boy who literally had not played club football. He was from a farm area, had not played club football at all.
Yeah.
And at 16, we picked him up, brought him into our academy to play 3rd division football in our country. That like it's like crazy to think actually, but that's the reality of it. So, and that's probably why we don't compete where we should. I say is that we haven't harnessed the talent we have.
Okay. And do you reckon that having a street football culture may have its positives in terms of players having more flair?
Yeah. Yes and no.
Okay.
So yes, it will develop players more flair, but also you then have these players that develop to their own strengths. So if I'm very fast, for example, and I'm playing street football, do I ever get into physical contact? No, I avoid it. So what kind of defensive player do I become? And I think that again is one of the issues we have is that in the modern game, players have to be rounded. I mean, we talk about players offensively. I
yeah,
mean, that is such a relative term. That's an insanely relative term, because I can tell you, if Trent Alexander-Arnold had come play in the South African PSL and played centre back, he'd be maybe the best defensive player in the league. So it
okay,
is very relative. You've got to be able to defend. You've got to be able to contribute on attack. Even goalkeepers. Look at a guy like Edison.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, he is what he is because he contributes on attack.
right,
Onana
yeah.
is a great example. So
I
yeah, I think developing a street environment has its positives,
Yeah,
but you do need to take that creativity and flair and nurture and round off some of it at some point. Um, the
right,
opposite of that, of course, is overcoaching, which you see, which is funny enough. If I look at an 8-year-old in the township environment and an 8-year-old in the urban environment where they're getting club coaching, the 8-year-old getting club coaching by and large in our country probably gets overcoached. He's like a robot. Do this, do
okay,
that, header now, pass here, dribble here, do this. And this 8-year-old is pure instinct to the
right.
point where sometimes they're like uncoachable.
It's all about getting
And
that.
then they meet up at 13 and you go, well, who's a good player?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get that. And what about the women's
Say
team?
again, sorry.
What about the women's football structure? How's that in South Africa?
So interesting enough, my first coaching job in senior football was a ladies team. I was, what was I, 20 at the time?
Yeah,
And they were an amateur club and a lot of young ladies, and it was very challenging. We were very bad. I don't mind saying. My first game as a senior coach, I think I lost 7-0.
okay,
Was very, and we just got run. Like very super proud of the girls. At some point, we won a game 2-1 in the season. That was our only win. And I was like, yes. So that was interesting. But yeah, the ladies' game in this country is certainly developing massively. The huge strides to make it happen. There's what's really interesting and I think good about our ladies' game is that it's developing. It had a zero base,
okay,
and so it also was outside the influence of a little more so in the men's game of corruption and greed. And when there's no resources in the game, greedy people aren't attracted to it, if I can say it that way. So it's had a really good foundational base, but it's been a bit regionalized.
okay,
So one of our famous players here, Janine van Wyk, years ago, she started up a league in the Gauteng area, and that has borne incredible fruit. It's been really well run, super successful, teaching, coaching at a good level, really delivering good players. But by the same token, where I am in Durban, 600 kilometers away, there's very little for young girls.
okay,
Um, so it's again, it's growing, but the structures aren't there, certainly for the youth. Um, as a result, you don't have a lot of girls entering the game for me at a young enough age to develop into really elite players.
yeah,
So, yeah, it's a challenge. A lot of it happens at schools, um, where they might play a school game
yeah,
um, in those environments, but very, very little happens for girls under the age of 10. So most girls are probably entering the game they might play with the boys, some handful, one, two, but
yeah.
in general, they probably don't enter the game before the age of 10 or 11, which is probably too late to really thrive. Yeah.
But I appreciate that you're telling it as it is. Like you're really giving us a good insight with the way it is. So now, you've done your pro license. Can you also now tell us what the South African coach education system is like?
Yeah. So I must consider myself very fortunate. Um, at the time I did my pro license, we had a gentleman called Michael Nies, a German,
Okay.
who had been technical director in other African countries, and he was head of coaching education at the time, and um, he really pushed. So he really pushed coaching education to another level over that period.
Okay.
I was fortunate enough to do in a 5-year period my BA and pro license, which is like
Yeah. Yeah.
certainly in this country is unheard of.
Yeah.
And so that was fantastic. We're lucky. The system itself, I think, is good. I think it's because it's had to sort of mesh with the African continent, the CAF badges, over the last sort of 5 or 8 years, which has definitely slowed down its effectiveness. Obviously, when you make it a continental badge, it has to be relevant across a continent.
Yeah.
It's no good us having a very Southern African bias towards a license,
Right.
even if it's European based, and you are unable to roll it out in Tanzania or Nigeria or even Egypt.
Mm.
So I think that's been. I mean, I'm not involved in it, but I think there's been a bit of a coming together there and having to work out how to do it with the resources available in different countries. But I think they've got there. The simple structure to it is you have a CAF D, a CAF C, a CAF B, CAF C, CAF D, C, B, A, Pro.
Yeah.
And that's the levels, which is exactly the same, I think, in
Right.
Asia and Europe and Oceania. I think it follows the same sort of structure.
Yeah.
And I think it, as far as I understand, and as far as I've read, I have managed to get hold of one or two of the manuals from other continents. It's very similar. There's
Okay.
not huge. It's football. I mean, the ball is round and we kick it.
Yeah.
So there's only so many differences you can have, I guess. So that's how it's structured. As I said, it's had a bit of a slowing over the last 5 years, but it looks like now they've sort of signed off with CAF and there's some momentum getting generated. We've just had an A license recently. We just had a B license recently. And I know that SAFA are quite serious about trying to get at least 2 A licenses a year, which would be a national badge, at least sort of 4 to 10 B licenses, C licenses. They want every single province should have 4 to 5. So you're
Okay.
talking upward of 30 or 40 a year. So they are quite serious about it, and I think we are getting there. And they actually signed off a mandate now this last week,
Right. And
where in the PSL, every single coach has to have a certain license to coach that from next season, which will be very interesting to see.
it will, and you're also actively involved because you are, I don't know what they call it in South Africa, but you're a coach developer, a coach educator. So, what's your experience of being in this role, and what are the aspects you judge of a coach who's on a course giving an assessment?
Yo, that's another. I knew that one was coming. I watched a couple of podcasts with the other guys and
Yeah,
knew it was coming.
yeah,
Look, I mean, first of all, I really enjoy the role of being a coach educator. I think imparting knowledge, and it's not that I have all the knowledge. Imparting knowledge on people, I think is an absolute. It's a blessing. I think we don't realize how important it is
yeah,
um, to be open and share information. I think it builds a level of trust. It builds a level of understanding, and it's not one way. So Ryan, when I'm educating you, for example,
yeah,
I'm observing you. I'm teaching you to observe by observing you, and that process in of itself allows me to learn from you,
yeah,
allows me to understand you. Um, and I think at a fundamental human level, it's so important we understand who we are and how to relate and how to communicate and how your culture is different,
yeah,
but it's not wrong. It's not a wrong culture.
mhm,
So that's I think that's where I really enjoy it.
yeah,
I love seeing the passion of coaches coming through.
yeah,
So you do those lower licenses, your D and C licenses, and you see a lot of, like I say respectfully, a lot of average coaches come on there. A lot of coaches that are not at a high level, aren't necessarily good coaches yet,
yeah,
but are passionate and just willing to go the extra yard and
yeah,
just willing to learn. And like I envy them at times because I think to myself, I'm sure I was like that in my 20s and such, but phew, I'm not there now. Surely they have got such a vigor for the game. That's
yeah,
it's such a thirst. So I enjoy seeing, um, and then it's just great seeing their journey as well. These coaches that come through and progress. In
this,
terms of, unfortunately, not everyone should be coaching. I'll say that honestly.
yeah,
Definitely come across some coaches that shouldn't shouldn't be allowed near the side of a football field,
yeah,
but should be allowed in the game of football. I think they have often they
yeah,
have other skill sets within the game
yeah.
but I think the coach thinks that's the glamour role. Coaching is the glamour role. If I'm not a player, I'm a coach. But actually, and that's, I think, part of education we've got to grow, is that there's no glamour role in football. There's no best role.
Right.
If we had, I think the game dies because we don't have great administrators or referees. There's a dearth of referees around the world. I mean, and I think some of these guys and girls' passion, if directed correctly, that would be outstanding for the game of football.
Yeah.
And I think we've got to build on that understanding a bit,
Right.
in terms of coaching, education, and how we do. But yeah, in general, I've really enjoyed it. It's great.
And have you noticed any major differences between the basic approach to football coaching in South Africa compared to European nations?
Sure. I think we are very heavily influenced by the European model,
Yeah.
through our history. Obviously, we're a colonial country. Through, I mean, our football was very heavily influenced by the British game throughout its history. Um, and then through our coaches, a lot of our coaches that have come to the country have been European, have been German,
Yeah.
English, through the development of our game. So we're very heavily influenced. So I don't know if there's a huge how we look to educate and even how we look to play. If I look at our landmark best team right now is probably Sundowns.
Yeah.
Sundowns have got a fairly European, Eurocentric game model,
Yeah.
and development style, and that's not wrong,
Yeah.
not at all. Um, I just think it's where we are as a country, and I think
Right.
if I had to use Brazil, Brazil's probably less European.
Yeah.
They've got a more of their own flavor and own flair, but that's probably because they had less interaction and less intervention.
Right.
It makes a country like yours, India, and the USA very interesting because I say respectfully to both nations, there's a growth happening there. And where are they getting their knowledge from? Where are they getting their influences from? There's so many, there's so many good, interesting models out there now in terms of how to educate coaches, how to play, how to develop players, how to create a culture. Look at the Japanese and their massive program at the moment that's been going on where they're trying to develop culture and the success it's having and
Yeah.
what the fan culture looks like there and how they develop players and the influence of someone like Vancouver
Yeah.
on the Japanese culture.
Right.
Uh, and I find it fascinating to see how that's going to take place. I have
Yeah.
no doubt the game in India will grow, and I have no doubt the game in America is going to explode in the next 5 or 10 years with the World Cup in there. But how it and what it looks like, and I think we are, as a football culture worldwide, we are heavily biased
Yeah.
towards the English Premier League, Spanish La Liga, German. That's best, right? So if a guy, be honest, if you had to, a guy from the English Premier League say, I'd love to be on your podcast.
Yeah.
He could be the tea server at, what do they call it in there? Chai server,
Yes.
chai wala. What do
Yes.
they call it in
Yes. They
India?
do. They,
He
yes.
could be the tea server at Man United, and you'd be like, yeah, let's get him on. He's so excited. So
So I
that's
think we are
yeah, I think
engrossed.
that's something
We're
that is
engrossed in the
natural,
glamour.
but we've got to be careful of. But yeah, we are definitely.
Right.
It is. Listen, to be fair, you're going to take it. I'd be like, I'm in, just
Right.
because you want to go there and test yourself.
Yeah. And
So yeah.
now, 2 weeks ago, quite a renowned South African coach, Pitso Mosimane, if that's how you pronounce his name. So he stressed on the
Good.
need for a well-structured and age-appropriate development curriculum, comparing the current programs to offering grade 3 level trainings for grade 1 students, which obviously leads to a misalignment in learning and skills development. So how true do you think that is in South Africa?
Um, yeah, it's. I don't think he is wrong in what he is saying,
Yeah.
but it's a difficult thing to roll out in our country because in if I'm just in Durban, I've got a kid who's at one of the clubs here locally.
Yeah.
which has resources, a middle income, upper income club,
Yeah.
resources.
Yeah.
What I can achieve with the curriculum there, because I can pay coaches, because I can buy balls, because I have fields and lights and time, and versus what I can achieve with a boy in by, and when I say nearby township, I'm talking 2 or 3 k's away.
Okay.
At that club, vastly different. It's very difficult to get a curriculum through there.
Right.
That said, I think we do need a better understanding. We need better coaches. We need coaches to understand that what is the right thing to coach at the right age.
Yeah.
And we don't, I think I agree with him. Yeah, I don't think we do that particularly well in this country where we're saying, hey, this should be the formula. This bundle of tools here is what you are using at this age. There's nothing that should live out of that, because if I live out of that, I'm coaching either below or above an age appropriate level. So I do agree with that, though. Look, and again, when I was running Soccer Tech, that is primarily what we did
Yeah.
at that underling pipeline level, where we would go to clubs and create curriculums and say, hey, we literally had a level book, level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And level 1 was intro to football. We had broken it down where we're not talking about dribbling and passing. We're talking about moving with the ball. We're talking about ball striking,
Yeah.
because that encompasses the broader set of skills.
Right.
And at that age, it's about fun and freedom and coaching chaos. I mean, it was one of the key things we brought there, was saying, hey guys, don't worry about lines. Don't worry about looking organized.
Yeah.
Know what you're trying to coach this lesson. If you're trying to coach running with a ball, moving with a ball,
Yeah.
and the kids are running all over the place, as long as it's safe,
Yeah.
you're doing your job. They're
That's
manipulating the
really good.
ball in space and having to get their head up and look, so they run into someone and run into a goalpost. It can look chaotic, but it can be very effective at that age. You're developing athleticism through football. So yeah, I do agree with him on that side of it. I think that's lost on a lot of clubs, a lot of players, where the English Premier League influence. We
Yeah.
go online, we go to YouTube, we see this drill that Man United do at their academy for under 10s. We
Yes.
bring it to South Africa and we coach under 9s, because it's almost under 10. Yeah, but A, the field is incredible where they're playing. B,
Yeah.
the players are incredible. If you have one, you will be lucky to have a player who's half as good as every player that's playing there. So you're now doing this drill where you're going, okay, guys, it's different up there again, and your players can't do it
Yeah.
because you're at the wrong level.
Right.
So I do think that is definitely something we got to work on.
No, I
Yeah.
think I think you've really summarized on two occasions here how one needs to customize one's approach according to the environment. It sounds so simple, yet doesn't happen too much. So this was amazing. And what advice do you have to any youth coaches who plan on, similar to yourself, reach, let's say, the youth national team level of their country?
What advice do I have to coaches that want to get to that level?
Yeah.
Don't do it. I'm joking. I would say, no, look at, hey, it was always my dream. It still is my dream to coach our national team,
Yeah.
is to coach in foreign markets and to at a high level, as high level as you can.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same as somebody starting at a low level. Just you got to work. You got to realize you got to work hard.
Yeah.
Like there are a lot of coaches out there that think I can rock up 20 minutes before my session, plan it, off I go. That's never going to get you far. That'll get you 1 or 2 years in the game, hopefully,
Yeah.
and you'll burn out just because there's no effort, and you'll find it boring and unstimulating. I think key is plan, prepare,
Yeah.
be passionate, focus on the detail. Even if your knowledge is low, focus on the detail of the knowledge you have.
Yeah.
If you're a new coach, be detail oriented.
Yeah.
Have a goal, work on it. Set up a training session. It can be rubbish. It's okay to put on bad training sessions.
Yeah.
I'm sure Pep Guardiola still puts on bad training sessions
Yeah.
for his level.
Mhm.
And he comes off the field and goes, oh, that was rubbish. That was torture.
Yeah.
I'm sure he does that. It's okay to have bad sessions, but it's not okay not to review sessions. You should walk off a field and spend 10 minutes, 15 minutes with yourself going, what was that all about?
Mm.
Maybe I need a tweak here, maybe a tweak there. maybe I need to have a word with that player. Maybe I need to have a word, and that is at all levels. You've got to work hard at the game. You've got to work hard at your own disciplines of plan, produce, review.
Yeah.
Plan, produce, review, tweak. That system. And then I can tell you, even within that system, you will intuit. Most of my coaching was done before the internet age. I mean, I sound old. I'm not that old, but before it was hugely accessible.
Yeah.
And the process of plan, produce, review is how I learned the game.
Yeah.
There were things that I would come up with that I would watch a game of football. I'd watch Man United, Leeds United, Liverpool, whoever was playing into a young player. How
Yeah.
do I put that into it? What do I do with it? How do I tweak that? What does it make me? All these questions.
Yeah.
It wasn't that I had huge readings of mountains of books I was reading. It was literally self analysis and self training, and you'd come up with concepts that would look very similar
Yeah.
to what a coach, Pep Guardiola or something like would come with 2 or 3 years later. Now that's not blowing one's trumpet. That's simply saying through self investigation, through
Yeah.
self learning, through trying and being willing to fail, you
Yeah.
can learn this great game yourself, and you can progress. Um, the other massive piece of advice I'd give you, any young coach that really does aspire to be at our level, is you've got to put yourself on the market.
Mhm.
It's something I didn't do particularly well. I thought, hey, people will see me. If I do well, people will see me.
Mhm.
And I did do well, but no one was seeing me.
Mhm.
It took me starting to have meetings and chat to people and, hey, you should come down and watch a game. It'll be fun. And in a subtle way,
Yeah.
you do it. It took a lot of that to be out there. So you've got to be willing to put yourself out there
Yeah.
and make a fool of yourself. That's really important because and it just goes completely left. It goes one of those days, and you've got to be humble enough to go, yo,
Yeah.
I messed up that session today. Anyway,
Yeah.
we'll get it next time. You've got to have that attitude. Yeah.
I
Cool.
so that brings us to the end of a wonderful conversation where you have really
Thank you.
explained well what South African football is about, and also you've told us things the way it is, as well as your experience
Mm,
in football, some very, very good advice, especially the plan, produce, review, which is again such a small, such a basic step, but isn't done enough, and about getting
mm.
yourself on the market. So it was wonderful chatting with you, and I thank you for your
Thank
time.
you.
Yeah.
No, pleasure. Thank you. And yeah, all the best, man. I really appreciate someone like you who's out there trying to build something and yeah, front footed and keep it up, mate. I hope this grows and you do great things. Thank you.